Good evening, everyone, and good evening to all our theatre techs. First of all, I wish I could have seen you all in person, but obviously with this coronavirus, it's very difficult to see people, and I think it's very difficult to see me. My camera's not the best as well, too. But I would like to, first of all, just let everyone know that this has been a very difficult EBA negotiations compared to our previous one back in 2015 and 2016. In 2015 and 16, there was a lot more money in the budget, so we were managed to get a very good deal, I would say. This time round, though, we did do a very good deal. Despite a lot of rumours and things that are said out there, I think it's actually one of the best also that we've been able to do for you. So although the government policy is 1.5% wages increase, we've managed to do 2% as a minimum wage increase. But what we've also done is look at your salary structures as theatre techs and looked at how we can do that better. So the government has pillars, which means we looked at loopholes in where we can do much better in your wages and conditions. And David Eden, our Assistant Secretary, and Cram and Granger Industrial Manager have done an extremely brilliant job to try and find loopholes to get you a better pay deal. What I want to do is, rather than me talk, is get David to explain exactly what you're going to get, and depending on your classifications, where you fit in the structure as well. But there's a lot of bonuses are coming your way, and to make sure that we get your feedback, this is the first stage of our communications to you. This is our phase of consultation. So we need to have your feedback, and there'll be a lot more information communicated back to you from us. And at the end of all this, if you find that, hey, I need to clarify something or not sure about something, we are actually asking you, please communicate back to us through our email systems. We will actually respond to you as soon as possible, basically. So without me speaking any further, I'll hand over back to David Eden, our Assistant Secretary, to explain in detail exactly what you will be getting is part of the new EBA. Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Diana. And just for those latecomers, once again, if you just run your mouse over the screen, you'll see a bar pop up across the bottom. We've just got you on mute at the moment. We've got the video. You can probably turn your video on if you want. It's up to you. We're not going to have an issue with bandwidth tonight, I don't think. And also about halfway along that bar, there's a chat button. Click on there and type away your questions. And what we'll do is have a good lengthy bit at the end to go through those questions and provide you with those answers. I might cover off on those questions as part of the presentation, so be it. But otherwise, don't hold back. Type away with your questions there. So there'll be two parts to the presentation. There's going to be one that's more general. It's going to be provided to everyone under the agreement, and then there'll be another part of the presentation where it's specific to the theatre technician group. So if you can bring up the first presentation, thank you very much, Jose, and we'll go to the second slide. So, we as union officials, we talk union talk all day and talk about the industrial relationship system as though everyone else understands what we're saying, and way too often do we see our members' eyes glaze over and look at us as though we're talking some kind of foreign language. So what I thought I'd do is give you a very basic outline of what an enterprise bargaining agreement does and how it comes about. And I use this cake analogy where the modern award is the cake, and that is the bare minimum you can have under your employment system, whether it's your wages or conditions. The modern award is your cake. It's the underpinning legislation, and then on top of that, the enhancements on the cake, such as the icing and the lollies and the candles, is your enterprise bargaining agreement. Your enterprise bargaining agreement lays over top of the award and enhances those wages and conditions. And when it comes to enterprise bargaining, what happens is that we go around and we engage with our members, we run surveys, we have our organisers out there talking to people individually. Our organisers also pick up problems with the existing agreement over the life of the agreement, feed it back to us as well. And what we do is we put together a wish list. But we're not the only people that do that. The employers also do the same thing. So the government engage with their their industrial advisor arm, and through them, the employers, and they also put together a wish list as well. And what happens is that we table our wish list, they table their wish list, and negotiations begin. And just like selling a car on the private market, you always whack an extra few $100 on it. And if someone's silly enough to pay that extra few $100, and all the bonus for you. But what ordinarily would happen is you get a negotiator in, they'll knock you down a few $100. You get exactly what you want for your car, you're happy, and what happens is that the buyer drives away with what they think's a bargain also. So enterprise bargaining is a very similar process where we'll always throw in our wish list with a few, lollies and candles on top. And what happens is over the negotiating period, we end up falling somewhere in between what the employers want and what our members ended up getting. If you go to the next slide, thanks, mate. The government wages policy that Diana mentioned, yeah, it was tough. It's a very strict wages policy. At the time when we started negotiations, it's 2%. You could get 2.5% if you agreed to just do a rollover. That rollover isn't available anymore, but the health professionals, they decided to do a rollover arrangement. And that means you can't negotiate anything new in your enterprise bargaining agreement. You'll just accept a 2.5% pay increase and see you in 12 months' time. Well, if I was the health professionals, I'd be pretty annoyed right now because they took that 2.5% and now they land firmly in the government's 1.5% wages policy. So they have been absolutely duped by the government. And if I was a health professional, I'd be very, very angry right now. So on to the next, thanks, mate. So Dino also mentioned wage pillar 3. And wage pillar 3, we sort of clued on pretty early as a union that we've got opportunities to get additional monies through this, particularly as a lot of our membership either has no qualification at all, or they have a certificate 3, certificate 4 diploma. And what the government, we can get extra money through Pillar 3 by supporting other government initiatives. And the TAFE system, this government, as you know, has invested heavily in, and it's not doing as well as they'd like. So we're able to present our case that we should be able to access additional funding through Pillar 3 because we want to have classification structures in place that support the TAFE system. So we're able to get additional funds through Pillar 3 to be able to do that. We also were able to get additional funds for particular groups where they haven't had very good wages outcome through enterprise bargaining in the past. And the food services is an excellent example of that, where the cooks and the chefs have not had a review of their classification structure since the mid-80s. And as a result, we're able to access some additional funds to address their wages and conditions as well. The other areas that we're able to access money through the third pillar is where we were able to demonstrate that men and women working side by side, working exactly the same jobs, having a situation where women, by the time they get to retirement, we're retiring with less in their superannuation. And the other access for wage pillar 3 is where we've been able to show that there has been disputation around a particular classification, and as part of the tidy up of this classification, we'll need some extra funds to get it sorted out so we don't continue to have disputes with the employers moving forward. Next slide, thanks, Mark. So what we did negotiate was an additional week's annual leave for all. So if you're currently a Monday to Friday worker and you've got 4 weeks annual leave, you will go to 5 weeks annual leave a year. If you are a shift worker and you work weekend shifts and you currently get 5 weeks annual leave, you will move to 6 weeks annual leave a year. Now, this is a big cost item, and as I said, with the negotiations, is always, they throw their wish list on the table, we throw ours. There was a bit of a trade-off for this one to get it over the line, and that was that we would accept the same deal to get the extra week's annual leave as the nurses did a number of agreements ago, and the medical scientists also accepted when they did their negotiations 4 years ago. So the trade-off is that if you work a public holiday at the moment, you get double time and a half. Under the new arrangement, you'll receive double time. If you're a full-time employee and you're rostered off on a public holiday at the moment, you get time and a half payment. Under the new agreement, you'll get single time. Under the current agreement, if you're a part-time employee, you only receive a rostered off benefit if you would ordinarily work that day of the week. If you do not ordinarily work that day of the week, there is no payment. Under the new agreement, what will happen is, regardless of whether you would ordinarily work that day of the week or not, you will get paid your average hours for that day at single time. So part-timers will receive a rostered off benefit in the future that they currently don't get at the moment, where they don't ordinarily work the day of the week. But what we've been seeing is an erosion of the rostered off entitlement for our members, where employers are having more and more part-time employees. They're manipulating the rosters in such a way that people aren't ordinarily working that day. But even regardless if you're part-time or full-time, we see this popping up all the time as well, where you might be rostered off Monday, Tuesday, the public holidays on the Wednesday, the employer approaches you and says, look, it's going to be pretty quiet on the Wednesday, it's a public holiday, have the day off. Well, at the moment, what you get paid is usual time, because it's not your rostered day off, it's an additional day, and that will continue into the future as well. So what we've seen over the last decade or so is employers, with the introduction of electronic timing systems and pay systems, employers are manipulating those rosters more and more to ensure that fewer and fewer people are getting the rostered off benefit for public holidays. So that come to a big cost item for the employer. Next slide, thanks, Matt. Long service leave after 7 years. So hot off the presses, the nurses agreement finally went through 2 months ago, and we said we'll have what they've got, thank you very much. And that is a long service leave clause that provides access after 7 years instead of 10. Now, this will be phased in over the next few years. So as of July 1 this year, if you've got 9 years service, you can access your long service leave pro rata based on the State Long Service Leave Act, which is a slightly less accrual rate than the award rate. Next year, you'll be able to access it after 8 years, and the following year and thereafter, you'll be able to access long service leave after 7 years, pro rata based on the State Long Service Leave Act. Now, as we know, we're getting younger workers into the workforce. They're more transient. They don't typically stay with the same employer for 10 years. Long service leave is a bit of a pipe dream for those individuals. If we start providing long service leave access at an earlier stage, maybe it's just the break they need to have a breather to remain in the health industry, or it could be that they want to access long service leave to finalise or complete some training to remain in the health industry. Next slide, thanks, Mel. How would you like an ADO once a month? So as I mentioned before, employers are employing more and more part-time staff and in reducing people's entitlements to roster off benefits for public holidays, for example. What we've been able to do is negotiate where you're an employee who does more than 37 hours a week, you can request your employer provide you with a rostered system of work that provides for an ADO once a month. So you don't get an ADO if you only work 37 hours. You can request a system of work that provides for an ADO, which means that you'll have to work 40 hours a week, but once a month, you'll be able to get an ADO. And we've seen situations in Mildura, for example, when they privatised that in 1998, that they sold off their ADOs. They had no choice. Well, this is an opportunity for those individuals to get them back. And we're seeing more and more contracts creep in where employers are employing people for 37.5 hours a week instead of providing them full-time. And they're usually replacing full-time employees as well. So this is our fight back to get those monthly ADOs for our members. Next slide, thanks, mate. Now, workload issues, they're not just unique for theatre technicians. Workload issues exist for pretty much every classification in the health industry. They are a problem. We, as a union, have been working with WorkSafe for the last 2 years, developing a guidance material for employers to better manage workplace fatigue. Those guidance materials have now been completed. And what we've done is we've embedded that guidance material into our enterprise bargaining agreement. So in the past, what's happened is that employees have thought, well, you know, I'm a theatre tech and I'm being rostered across 3 theatres instead of 1 theatre for the day. I've got workload issues. You raise it with your employer and they go, oh yeah, we'll deal with it under the grievance procedure, which means that you continue to work in a customer practice until the grievance is resolved. And by the end of the day, the situation's resolved and the problem goes away. Well, not now. You raise an issue in relation to fatigue and workload, it's going to have to be dealt with the fatigue guidance material in mind, and the employers are going to have to address it immediately. None of this putting it off till the end of the shift. You'll have rights under this particular clause. WorkSafe, we're absolutely ecstatic that we've embedded this guidance material in our enterprise bargaining agreement, and I think we're going to get a lot of success in dealing with workload issues across Victoria by accessing this particular clause. Next slide, thanks, mate. If you're you're obviously regional health and safety representatives or regional theatre technicians, if you have a health and safety representative, they're entitled to a 5-day basic course after they're elected, and then they're entitled to a 1-day refresher course every year. If you don't have a health and safety rep in your department, I suggest that you talk to your organiser about how to get one elected. It's really important that you have a health and safety representative in your area. You can also have someone there to a deputy health and safety representative as well. So there's 2 people sharing the responsibility. The employers have got to pay for the training and all the rest of it. So please, I encourage you, if you don't have a health and safety rep in your department, organise one. The training provider we recommend for regional Victoria for health and safety is Be Safe. They're prepared to travel all across regional Victoria, and they are union-based training firms. So if you haven't got a health and safety rep, get yourselves organised. There's going to be additional benefits for having health and safety reps as well. And if we move to the next slide, here's one of those benefits. So this idea came about when I was working at St John of God in Ballarat, and I was elected to health and safety rep within my unit, and I went off, did my 5-day basic course. I was having a great time ensuring that there's OH&S compliance on my floor and training for various pieces of machinery we had to make sure that everyone was operating things safely, making sure the maintenance was up to date and all the rest of it. And what happened was I was approached by the health and safety manager of St John of God in Ballarat, and he said, look, you've got a real passion for this. How would you like to come and work over in my department on a secondment basis 1 day a fortnight? And I said, well, if you can tee it up with my manager, I'd love to. So what I did was I went over there 1 day a fortnight, but I wasn't the only health and safety rep over there. He had other health and safety reps working on sometimes the same day, it might be other days. And one of the health and safety reps over there that was there at the same time as me quite often was the chef. And I was wondering what was going on. Why was he building these sorts of relationships? And it finally dawned on me that this guy wasn't from the health industry and didn't have a handle on all the health and safety risks that were faced by employees within that hospital. So he was there developing policies and procedures to protect workers based on our information. We were educating him about what was going on in that hospital and how to develop those policies and procedures. But it wasn't a one-way education. He wasn't the only one being educated by us. He also educated the health and safety reps as well. So it was a shared learning, and it was an absolutely fantastic opportunity for people. And what happened was that the health and safety rep from the kitchen, the chef, she went on and did a certificate 4 in health and safety, and when he retired, she replaced him. So I think this is a great opportunity for health and safety reps to develop these relationships, do these secondments into these departments, be inspired, go on, do your Cert 4 in occupational health and safety or your diploma, and one day end up running a health and safety department in a hospital somewhere in Victoria. Next slide, thanks, mate. Well, yeah, obviously none of us are getting any younger, and injuries creep in. Sometimes they're not always an immediate injury. That's not just a break or a sprain or a laceration. It could be a worn-out joint. And theatre techs certainly aren't immune to that. You do repetitive work day in, day out, moving people on and off the surgical equipment and putting all the braces and stirrups and all that sort of stuff in place. You're not immune to getting a workplace injury, and it might be a repeated stress injury. But as mentioned before, we have got an ageing workforce, and we have had the odd member we've had to represent as well. It hasn't had a physical injury, but they've actually had some mental decline. So they've had early onset Alzheimer's, and they haven't been able to do their job as well as they once were, and they're struggling in their workplace. So what's happened traditionally is that the employers dragged individuals in that have had some kind of injury, or they're just simply wearing out, or mentally they're just not up to it, and they put them on a performance improvement plan. Why? These people are aging in the workplace, they're getting worn out. Why are you putting them on a performance improvement plan? Now what's going to happen is, where it's been identified that you have a disability as part of the investigation looking into your performance, then it's going to be dealt with under the equal opportunity clause in the agreement, where the employer is going to have to put reasonable job adjustments or work adjustments in place to maintain your employment within that organisation. And it might mean that you're no longer able to do that job. It might be another job, or it might mean that there's a particular part of your job that you can't do, and they might have to access, and there's funding available for this. They might be able to access some funding to replace you doing a particular part of your role ongoing, which means you can continue to do the rest of your role. So we're pretty much sick and tired of having our long-term members' performance improvement planned out of employment when they've simply become worn out working for that employer, and there needs to be done more. We need to do more about keeping these people in employment. Next slide, thanks, mate. The Workplace Trainer Careers Advisor. The Workplace Trainer Careers Advisor positions are in every hospital in Victoria. We negotiated that in your current enterprise bargaining agreement, and they are there to help you. They're there to help our members, and they've been appointed by the workplace implementation committees. And they've picked up some additional responsibilities as part of this enterprise bargaining agreement. One of them is, where a position's been deemed to be redundant, the Workplace Trainer Careers Advisor will get in the earliest possible convenience to help with possible retraining and redeployment of the person who's been made redundant, but also where someone's had a workplace injury and they're not likely to return to their pre-injury employment. The Workplace Trainer Careers Advisor will be there to assist with retraining and redeployment of that injured worker. Next slide, thanks, mate. So we've got 30 EFT of Workplace Trainer Careers Advisor across every hospital in Victoria at the moment. This agreement will deliver an extra 15 EFT, so it's not 15 positions as such. It could be that some of those positions are part-time, they'll move to full-time now. We've got extra employers coming onto this agreement to be respondent to this agreement, which is fantastic. So we've got another 5 respondents coming in. They'll also get their share of Workplace Trainer Careers Advisor to help those members with their careers as well. So there's an additional 15 EFT coming into the mix, bringing it a total to 45 across the state of Victoria. This union has, since Diana Asmar took over, has invested heavily in your career paths and your training opportunities, and we're continuing to invest in that. Next slide, thanks, mate. So theatre techs might not hear this as often as other classifications, where they go to their supervisor or their manager and say, look, I want to access some study leave, and the employer will go, what are you studying? And they'll go, well, that's got nothing to do with your job that you're doing at the moment here, so no, you can't have study leave. They can't be saying that anymore. If you're requesting study leave and it's to do with, it's health industry related, the employer will not be able to refuse access to study leave for the purpose of career progression under this agreement. You'll also be able to enter into flexible work arrangements with the employer. So there might be a course that's on a particular day of the week at TAFE, and you can't work that day of the week. You can enter into a flexible work arrangement with the employer to enable you to attend that. It could be that you've got a clinical placement at the end of the course and you might need some particular time off to do that clinical placement. There's going to be lots of flexibility around negotiating for flexible work arrangements for you to access and progress your career path. Also, what we've done is we've introduced it's a $500 payment a year. It's paid in two sums. This year will be in one sum, and it's to all unqualified employees. So theatre technicians grade 1s who are unqualified, who are going on to do their Certificate 3 or Certificate 4 in theatre tech. What they're going to be able to do is they'll be paid this. Most likely in September this year, they'll get $500. Each year after that, it'll be in March and September, $250. And it's to help them buy their course materials. We know the course is free, but sometimes the materials cost, and to help them buy their books and their computers and all that sort of stuff. So this education incentive allowance is specifically aimed at the lowest paid workers in this agreement, and those who have not had an opportunity to do any formal qualifications in the past. So where people have had a financial hurdle to advance their career in the health industry, this is to aid them get over that hurdle. Next slide, thanks, mate. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we were able to access additional funds through Pillar 3, where we were able to demonstrate where men and women working side by side, doing exactly the same job, doing the same hours and all the rest of it, and come retirement, the females are generally retiring with less in their superannuation than men. Why? They're more likely to have parental leave than men. And what we've managed to negotiate is not only do all employees now get paid superannuation every 4 weeks instead of quarterly, because the compound interest is better in your super account than what it is in the employer's accounts, but also women who are on, or anyone who's on parental leave, it might be a same-sex couple, people who are accessing parental leave will have superannuation contributions made every 4 weeks. And it's not just on the paid component of the parental leave, it's on the non-paid component. So 12 months super contributions made into your super account based on your previous 12 months income. That's absolutely massive come retirement age for an individual who's planning a family. So that's an incredible outcome, and very, very proud of that, being one of the first unions in Australia to negotiate that. Next slide, thanks, mate. Now, as we know, there's been some disputation around the theatre tech classifications. As it stands at the moment, we head off to the Fair Work Commission. It can take months for a Fair Work Commission date to be listed. Then we end up before a commissioner who has no health industry background, and depending on what side of the bed they got out of that day as to whether or not they want to even hear the case in the first place or dismiss it outright. What happens then is it will take another several months for the commission to finally hand down a decision. What we've done, and it's not just our union, the nurses have signed up to this, and I'm pretty sure the medical scientists and health professionals, etc., will also sign up to this. Where there is a classification dispute, there is going to be an industry review panel that we can present the case to. The industry review panel will be chaired by an independent individual, most likely a retired commissioner with a health industry background, and it is only accessible to union members. So union members will have the HW provide the evidence and the arguments to the industry review panel, and the employers will have VHIA present their side of the case, and the independent chair will make the decision on whether or not they accept or reject the reclassification issue. I think it's going to be a much better process. It's going to be someone who knows the health industry and better knows what you guys do. But also it'll be a much speedier process and a fairer process, I think, than the Fair Work Commission. Next slide, or is that it? That's it. We're into, so what I might quickly do before we jump into this, I've got a really short video to play that that sort of outlines what the job of the workplace trainer careers advisor does. So I'll just quickly play that first, if you don't mind, Jose. And then we'll get into your specifics.
A long road and the money's gone. All the games where you played your part from the very start just to come this far. You should know I believe in you. Every race you run, you're my number one. Kick it up now and bring it on. This will be your day. 'Cause baby, you were born to win. Never give up, never give in. You were born to win. Your destiny is victory. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Baby, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Baby, you were born to win. You set it up and you knock it down. You're all set now to rock this town. You don't really need to play it low. Just get up and go. This is all your show. You should know I believe in you. Every race you run, you're my number one. Kick it up now and bring it on. This will be your day. 'Cause baby, you were born to win. Never give up, never give in. You were born to win. Your destiny is victory. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Baby, 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 yeah, yeah. Baby, you were born to win.
Thanks very much for that, Jose. Now we'll get into the specifics for the theatre technicians. And if we move to slide 2. Now, when we took a fair approach with the nauseous allowance under the current agreement, where there were classifications that were historically entitled to the nauseous allowance, but the employers were more and more successfully mounting arguments around the definition of that nauseous. And nauseous is that where you're doing work of an unusually dirty or offensive nature, having regard to the type of work you do. So we had laundry hands, for example, working in laundries in the dirty linen area, and they weren't able to get nauseous allowance. Now, they're getting some filthy stuff through the room, but because it wasn't considered more nauseous than what they should be expecting as part of their role, the employers were reducing that entitlement. So what we did was we used the bucket of nauseous allowance and we fairly and evenly distributed it across all the classifications and rounded it up into 2 payments over the life of the agreement. Now, the theatre techs did make it clear to us that they were one of the very, very few groups that were getting paid nauseous allowance on an hourly basis. Most others were getting paid at more on a weekly basis, and it wasn't a hell of a lot of money. But what we thought we'd do is make it very fair and distribute it more evenly across all those classifications that are exposed to nauseous. But we've heard you loud and clear. You want to receive your nauseous allowance, you want to receive it on a more regular basis than every second year. So what we've got is, and this is just for theatre techs, it's not for other classifications under this agreement. Other classifications are getting a single payment every year of $350 in 1 December, so just before Christmas. And look, these laundry hands and cleaners and that who are the lowest paid could certainly do with a little Christmas bonus in 1 December. But what the theatre techs are going to receive is 2 payments of the nauseous allowance, one on the 1st of July and one on the 1st of December. Totaling $700 nauseous allowance a year. So 2 payments of $350 a year, totaling $700 a year for laundry for the theatre technicians. Next slide, thanks, mate. Well, you guys probably wear your lead aprons in the theatres alongside the nurses and scratching your head, how come the nurses now get a lead apron allowance? Well, we've consistently put lead apron allowance in our enterprise bargaining agreement log, our wish list, if you like, over the years. Never have we achieved lead apron allowance. The nurses do it once, they pull it off. Why? They've got 90,000 members. what government's crazy enough to say no to them? So I dream of the day that we're back to 90,000 members or up to 90,000 members. But as a result of the nurses getting lead apron allowance, we're able to argue that you guys are working in the theatre environment alongside these individuals. They're getting paid the lead apron allowance. You should get paid a lead apron allowance as well. And as a result, if for each shift that you're required to wear a lead apron, you'll get $8 a shift as of 1 July, so it'll be backdated to 1 July. The following year, it will be $8.24. In 2023, it will be $8.49, and in 2024, it will be $8.74 in line with the nurses' arrangement. So you'll be getting a lead apron allowance if you're required to wear a lead apron in your theatre environment. So that's something else that I must be upfront though. The theatre techs aren't the only ones that are going to get the lead apron allowance. Interpreters will get it as well, because interpreters will be required to wear lead aprons from time to time for these procedures. But overwhelmingly, lead apron allowance is purely a theatre tech allowance. Next slide, thanks, mate. On-call allowance, we tried to lift the on-call allowance up to the same rate as the nurses for all our classifications. We were unsuccessful in that based on the wages outcomes we got. But what we did manage to do is increase the on-call allowance specifically for the theatre technicians for weekends and public holidays. So this year it'll be $66.10 backdated to 1 July. Next year, $68.10. The following year, $70.10, and in the final year, $72.20. So theatre technicians will get a higher rate for on-call for being on-call for a weekend or a public holiday. Next slide, thanks, mate. As mentioned before, the education incentive allowance will be for theatre technician grade 1s only, because they're at that level where they have no formal qualification. This year, it will be a $500 once-off payment, most likely in September. But each year after that, there will be 2 payments of $250, one in March and one in September, and that is to help those lowest paid workers fund the books or materials or computers they need to complete their training and have a career in the health industry. Next slide, mate. So translation, the theatre tech structure is currently 6 tiers or 6 grades, and what the employers were able to do is provide, well, the government ultimately was able to do is provide us some additional wage uplifts if we address a number of disputations that we have with the theatre tech classification structure at the moment. And how that was seen to be most efficient is to reduce the theatre technician classification back to 5 grades instead of 6. And we also made some changes to the definition. So we had a theatre tech working group working on the definitions for many, many months. And even that group itself was very divided in their opinion. But I think what we end up at the end of the day with was a good definition, and we're going to run through them in a moment. But as your current classification is, this is a direct translation. So regardless of what the definitions are in the new agreement, you will directly translate across. So if you are, so what the theatre tech group decided to do, to take us a step back, is instead of cutting off the top like the instrument techs did and reducing it back to 5 grades, the theatre tech group decided that they'd collapse the bottom, and they put the theatre tech grade 1 position and the 2 position together to form the new theatre technician in training grade 1. The theatre technicians grade 2 will become also, as you can see, the translation grade 1 and grade 2 become the new grade 1. Theatre technician grade 3 moves, and it's just in title only, it's not in rates of pay. The theatre technician grade 3 becomes grade 2. The theatre technician grade 4 becomes 3. Theatre technician grade 5 becomes 4, and the theatre technician grade 6 becomes 5. Next slide, thanks, mate. So what does this mean from a wages point of view? And as I said, pillar 3, we were able to get additional funds above the government's wages policy of 8% if we were to address disputation. And we believe with the new classification structure, the employers and ourselves will have fewer disputes over the grading system. And as a result, we're able to get additional wages uplift above the government wages policy of 8%. So by collapsing the 1 and 2 together, essentially 1 has moved up to level 2, and that explains why we've got a 17.6% uplift at that particular level. The grade 2 equates to 9.7% over the life of the agreement. The grade 3 is 13.1%. And if you are a current grade 5 theatre tech and you've translated to grade 4, what's going to happen is, and I'll go through the definitions in a moment, your current rate would have been 1305. You will move across to 1332, so it's a 2% wage increase, but you only remain as a theatre tech grade 4 for 12 months, and it's an automatic progression to grade 5. So in 2022, you go from 1332 down to 1456.40. You're at the top tier of the theatre tech classification structure, and that for the grade 4s is a 16% wage increase over the life of the agreement. The only ones we weren't able to get additional wage uplifts over the life of the agreement is, well, what is the current grade 6s, which will become the new theatre tech grade 5s. There was just no leverage there whatsoever. It is so far ahead of the pack when it comes to wages. The fact that we used every argument we thought was possible to us to try and leverage more. The government wages policy is what it is, and that's why we then changed our focus onto those allowances and to improve those allowances and make it particular for theatre techs only. So you still end up with well beyond the government wages policy at 8.2%. So if you go to the next slide, I know this is, actually it's come up pretty clear. I was a bit worried because the grade 1, because we've condensed grade 1 and 2, there was a lot of text in there, and I thought it was going to be a little bit small for people to read. But essentially what will happen is that a theatre technician grade 1 is someone with less than 12 months experience working as a theatre technician, or you may have more than 12 months experience working as a theatre technician, but without a theatre technician qualification. Your supervision is that you are your grade 1 with less than 3 months experience, full-time equivalent, must work under direct supervision of a grade 4 or above, and that's direct supervision. The grade 1 with 3 or more months experience, full-time equivalent, will work under the direct guidance of a grade 4 or above. The qualification you need at this level is doesn't hold a theatre tech qualification or holds a theatre tech qualification but has less than 12 months experience. And a theatre tech qualification could either be the Certificate 3 or the Certificate 4. It doesn't define it at this level of what it needs to be, the Cert 3 or the Cert 4. And essentially your duties are what they are at the moment: performs work of a general nature, including transport, setup, cleaning, maintaining theatre equipment, etc. How you progress to level 2 is during the first 3 months of experience. What will happen is that the grade 1 will be assessed against local capability framework criteria to determine their suitability for continued employment within the theatre tech classification structure. So what the theatre tech focus group said is that they didn't want people coming up through the system that weren't cut out for the job, and they wanted to assess them at the 3-month mark to ensure that they were cut out to be theatre techs, and if not, then they would be transferred back to the departments they've come from, because there is a bit of an expectation that people are going to be transferring into the theatre tech departments from other departments in the hospitals. So it's almost like you dip your toe in for 3 months, see how you go, see how you handle it, and then you either continue on progressing with your theatre tech qualifications. So where the grade 1 does not meet local capability frameworks, you go back into your previous role. Grade 1 will progress to theatre technician in training. Grade 2, where they meet the local capability framework and has completed 12 months experience full-time as theatre tech and holds a theatre tech qualification. As I said, it doesn't differentiate between the Certificate 3 or the Certificate 4, but it's you cannot progress to the next level until you have a formal qualification. Next slide, thanks, mate. So a theatre technician grade 2 is some experience is greater than 12 months experience full time. You hold a theatre tech qualification. As I said, it doesn't differentiate whether it's a cert, or it doesn't define whether it's a cert 3 or a cert 4. It's just a qualification. And I know it was a bit of an issue for some of the techs to say, look, it's really important they do the cert 3 before they do the cert 4. But what's happening is that a number of PSAs who've got cert 3s don't want to do another cert 3 because it costs them money. But if they do a cert 4 in the TAFE system, it's going to be a free qualification. So we are seeing people come in to these areas with the cert 4 without having the certificate 3. It's not ideal, but it is what it is. And we're seeing a decline in the amount of training providers also offering the certificate 3. The duties, you work within established guidelines, procedures, undertakes work of a more complex nature, gaining experience, rotating through all surgical and clinical specialties offered at hospital under indirect guidance of a grade 4 or above. And grade 2 will automatically progress to grade 3 where they hold the certificate 4. So this is where we definitely underline the fact that you need a certificate 4 to get to the grade 3 level or above, or an equivalent qualification awarded by a registered training organisation recognised by the employer as such. Have greater than 24 months experience. So in the Theatre Tech group were very strict on this. They seen the structure as a traineeship or almost like a trade qualification. They wanted to see people get the appropriate supervision and time to learn their craft before they start moving or progressing through the structures. And is able to work in all surgical and clinical specialties offered at that hospital operating suite and operate with a high degree of autonomy and accountability. And once you can demonstrate that, grade 2 then moves on to the grade 3 level. Grade 3. Next slide. Means a person who has greater than 24 months experience as a theatre technician, holds a certificate 4 or an equivalent that's recognised by the employer. The duties is able to work in all surgical clinical specialties offered at that hospital or operating suite, operate with a high degree of autonomy and accountability, is not required to supervise or train other technicians, because what we want to do is make sure that they weren't going to try and undercut at least the grade 4 or above levels. Progression, the grade 3, so essentially that's the same as level 2, and to get into 3s, it's just the additional time spent. The grade 3 will progress to theatre technician grade 4, where they can establish they are able to work in all surgical or clinical specialties offered at that hospital, have greater than 3 years experience working full-time as a theatre technician, and undertakes additional given responsibilities determined locally. Examples of additional responsibilities may include, but not limited to, supervision and training of junior technicians, quality and governance, floor coordination and rostering, or where mutually agreed, works across multiple hospitals, sites or campuses. On to the next one. Thanks, mate. So a theatre technician grade 4 has greater than 36 months experience as a theatre tech. You hold a certificate 4 or an equivalent qualification that the employer is happy with. Duties has a comprehensive knowledge and ability to work in all surgical clinical specialties offered at hospital, and operates at a high degree of autonomy and accountability, and undertakes additional given responsibilities determined locally. For example, those examples but not limited to supervising training of junior staff, quality and governance, floor coordinating, rostering, and may be required to perform higher duties where the theatre technician manager is on leave, or where mutually agreed, work across multiple campuses. The grade 4 will progress, and this is where I was, can I just go back to a couple of slides to where I was talking about the wage increases, and then I'll jump back to here. So it's slide 7. Slide 7. Yeah, slide 7, that's it. Thanks. So where I was saying before that the theatre technician grade 4 goes from 1305.90 to 1332, and then the next year what happens is they drop down to 1456.40. So the theatre tech grade 4 goes to theatre technician grade 5 automatically after 12 months, and that's what gives them the 16% wage increase over the life of the agreement. So if you want to go back to that slide at the grade 5, which I think is slide 12, essentially the grade 4 and 5 definition is identical. What happened was that the employers and ourselves, we could not agree on what makes it different. What sort of duties, responsibilities make things different between the top 2 levels, 4 and 5. So what we did was we just took them off the table and said, let's just leave it as an additional 12 months experience. So if you're a theatre technician grade 4 and you've been there for 12 months, you will now automatically progress to grade 5. There are no additional responsibilities or duties or anything like that beyond the grade 4. It's simply years of experience. The final slide, that's the industry review panel, which I've mentioned before. So if there's any disputes on the classification structures, that's where it's going to be dealt with. We've had only a couple of questions come through, and what I'll do is I'll hand over to Cameron now to answer any questions that may have come through. Thanks, Cameron.